Okay, today we are playing a game on VoD. We were in the Platinum SR range, and we will be playing about 2/3 of the game as Ashe and about 1/3 of the game as Widowmaker. And our current team composition is Reinhardt, Zarya, Reaper, Ashe, Ana, and Lucio. So, extremely boring. Not a lot to say about it. We're also on the console today, so consider yourself forewarned. Haha, he remembered and everything. Incredible. I'm not a big fan of this black crosshair that we've got very much. It's hard to see when it's on anything that isn't just like a light background, really. So we do cut all the way across the choke point right here. I don't really want to be, like, in this room over here, regardless, because it's not exactly a great place for Ashe to be. I'd rather be playing further back around the, well, where Ana's standing right now, pretty much, rather than going over into that small room. It is the way our team is starting to go, but I don't want to be one of the first ones in there as Ashe, you know. They can go on ahead of me, I'll catch up later. I got a long-range gun, it's fine. So, we know they've got a Pharah. We obviously have to worry about Pharah as Ashe. We got the Pharah, hooray, fantastic, good times. We also managed to get the Symmetra. Wow, look at that, everything's going incredibly. So we are slowly making our way through the door. Oh, we managed to get Hammond. Nice. That's always very satisfying when you just click on someone and you're like, oh, we have like 3 hit points. Nice, I got a kill. Easy game. Easy fucking game. So we've managed to make it through the doorway. Farah's coming back at this point. She's actually like fully back at this point. Oh, fuck. Oh, she was trying real hard right there. That was pretty sick that we got her, actually. That was like a hard series of flicks to make right there, especially on console. So that was pretty sick. We got her good. Symmetra's ult is in the way right now. Tremendously inconvenient for us as, Ashe. I fucking hate playing against Symmetra, dude. Fucking Symmetra's wall is in the way. It's very hard to actually, like, get much done at that point. So, we've managed to capture the first checkpoint. They still have the Pharah, even though we've killed the Pharah twice now, and Pharah hasn't really accomplished a huge amount, so, you know, it was about average for an Overwatch game, isn't it? So we got shot before we could get back through the doorway. Did we go, like, real far out? We didn't go, like, real far out. We just got, like, clapped before we got back through the doorway. It is very aggressive to go all the way up there to try for that. Because we were pretty far up, but, you know, we were playing near cover. We got shot by 2 people, like 2 snipers, before we got back around the doorway again, so. Pharah came round and did the good old flanking barrage. Not terribly impactful at the time she's done it, because, well, we're right outside our spawn right now, so they didn't exactly get much progress, or they didn't really stop our progress for very long on that one, but, you know, people are going to do whatever they want to do with their ultimates, right? So we throw Bob in right here. It's not a great angle for Bob because of, well, we've chucked him at Hammond pretty much, but everybody else, like their team, it's going to be a hard team to really get much done against Bob because a lot of them are going to be really far away. So most of them are going to be able to get out of the line of sight of Bob relatively easily because, like, Widowmaker's obviously going to be on top of the castle. Hanzo's probably going to be high up somewhere. Pharah could fuck up and get clapped by Bob pretty easily, but for the most part, like, Hammond isn't particularly phased by Bob, so it's going to be a hard team to get a lot of value out of as Bob, with Bob, but just like chucking it here, so like if it hits Hammond, he stops like right here, a little bit behind Hammond, because he goes a little bit past them, in which case the wall's going to be blocking some line of sight. So Bob's line of sight is going to be like a bit of the street, but like anybody can just go around there. If they're up there, they're gonna just like back up and get out of the line of sight. If they're up there, obviously gonna just step back. So like Bob stopping like right here isn't particularly helpful, just because he can't see like a huge expanse of the street. Now if there's a lot of people stood like right over here, you know, which is sometimes the case, then Bob will get a lot of value, because, well, at least until they get back around the corner again. But, like, for this map, we really want Bob, like, more up this way, so that he can see up the long part of the street, pretty much. Because you'll find a lot of people, like, if they're fighting up here, you know, fair enough, whatever. But, like, most of the way this map goes, you push past this first curve, not too much difficulty, and then start stalling up here. My experience, anyway, yours might differ. But, like, having him be able to see up the long part of the street just gives Bob more line of sight than it does him stopping over here. And, like, we just chucked him at, Hammond, pretty much, and Hammond's ended up dying, so that's great. And Bob actually ended up managing to get Mercy as well, but he's ended up stopping there, so Bob can't really see very much over there either. In fact, it's worse, actually, because now he can't see up the street at all. But, like, if he can stop, like, right around where Zari is, he can see up the long part of the street and the short part of the street, so it's just, like, maximizing Bob's line of sight, pretty much. The thing is then that Bob is in a more exposed location, which can make it easier to kill Bob, so there's a trade-off on both ends, but generally I'm not too concerned about Bob surviving, because if Bob's in a position where he can see people, Bob's usually going to do, like, a lot of damage before he gets got, so if they get him, because, like, most people are going to start scattering as soon as Bob's on the field. So we're entering the Widowmaker segment of the game here. I think we play the entire rest of the round as Widowmaker, and then we change back for round 2. It's, you know, there's slightly more Ashe than Widowmaker. So we want to control the high ground. We've still got the Farah to deal with. They've also got the Widowmaker and the Hanzo on their team as well. So there are a lot of things for us to worry about as Widowmaker. I mean, we still have to worry about them as Ashe, right? But now there is more of an onus on us to kill, like, the Widowmaker and the Hanzo as well. Whereas previously, we were only really concerned with the Farah, and if we could get the Ashe, that was great. We basically just decided to, like, give up on that one. It's fair enough. It looks a bit like we were about to try and coach gun away, because we, like, looked at the ground and then went, oh, wait, no. Did just change heroes, so Hanzo managed to assassinate Reinhardt right there, which is very, very upsetting, and you know, our teammates are doing a lot of getting picked off. Now, what you'll notice is that their team does have a lot of DPS on it, so I see the, like, triple, quad, or quintuple DPS teams win a lot more often than people expect them to. And it's purely because of, like, stuff like this, where the way you deal with that is not getting picked off, right? Like, as long as you weather, like, the initial start of the fight, and, like, you have a concentrated team fight, then it's not much of an issue, because your team will have better staying power than theirs. The problem is that if there are, like, multiple DPS, the way they win is they get a lot of picks, because they've got a lot of DPS, but, like, if they can pull the team apart a little bit and get into, like, a bunch of skirmishes, right? Because if you have, like, a 6v6, then theoretically the better team comp, which is, like, our team comp, on paper should win, right? But if you're having, like, a 2v2, a 3v2, a 1v2, right? And different parts of the map, because they've got way more DPS than your team does, they are more likely to win those skirmishes because they can just, like, pop the people they're fighting faster than your team is likely to, just because of the sheer amount of DPS on their team. So, like, you want to avoid things like that. The problem is getting your teammates to, like, work together in Overwatch is extremely difficult. Ooh, unfortunate time to have to reload right there. Managed to not kill Farah because we have to reload. Life is difficult. Very tragic. So she gets to live, even though she performed a very big no-no with that barrage. But she got away with it. She didn't get punished, so she doesn't have to learn. So it's a far... Oh, fuck. Ooh, fuck. That was unfortunate. So we were, like, trying to get her, and just, like... Soldier just, like, came into view. No, Soldier was already there. Maybe we tried to coach gun back, because we were playing Ashe a second ago, and it did look like we were planning to coach gun, and then went, oh right, I'm playing Widow a second ago as well. It happens. I've definitely been playing, like, Reinhardt or Bridget, and then been like, alright, time to shield bash, and then just, like, coach gunned backwards or something like that instead. So, anyway, we've used Infrasight now, which makes it easier to get the pick. We managed to do most of the damage to Mercy right there, so she finishes off the, Moira manages to finish off the, Mercy with Coalescence. Oh, fuck. Okay, that's fair. I mean, that was very scary, but we fucking got that Soldier, yo. And then we stopped the teabag him. Understandable. I fully understand. Farah also just, like, popped out. As far as I'm concerned, look, we led to Mercy dying, and we killed the soldier. So maybe we died to the Farah. Alright, but we killed 2 people first, we led to 1 dying, killed the other one, and then Farah killed us, like, 1,000 miles away from her team, so... As far as I'm concerned, we won, to be honest. You know, we did good enough right there. So, I haven't really had that much to say about the game, really, so far, because I feel like, for the most part, we've pretty much just been playing Ashe and Widowmaker, you know? Like, there hasn't been a lot much going on. Good English, yes. We've put the Venom Mine down, so, like, that's honestly, like, the biggest thing for me when watching the Widowmaker games, is, like, do they put Venom Mine down? We're putting Venom Mine down. I'm very excited about that. So Soldier's using Tac Visor right in front of us right now, and we're trying to get him, but it is, of course, very scary to poke your face out against the Tac Visor, so we did not manage to get him. We tried as best we could without, like, exposing ourselves too much. Didn't manage to kill Mercy, you know, Widowmaker does start getting, like, a lot less good on this checkpoint, just because the lines of sight are a little bit harder to, work with. They are conveniently coming out of the choke point, which makes it easier for us, but it's less good lines of sight for Widowmaker on this one. McCree tried to, like, get into a sniper fight with us, and, like, McCree, dude, what the fuck are you thinking? Like, come on. You can't do that. We're, like, 1,000 miles away from the Widowmaker. McCree, like, has to hit you so many times, you know? Like, don't get into a fucking sniper fight if you're playing McCree. So, trying real hard. Alright, not a big window, but we got infra sight. Unfortunately, they're getting pushed back, so we didn't actually manage to get them. I'm fucking, like, leaning forward over in my chair, like, somehow that's gonna help me see around the wall that we can't see around. Got Widowmaker. We're playing a sniper right now. We're sitting real far back. You know, aim better, all that. We've been using Venom Mine. We haven't really used Infrasight at bad times, so yeah, I haven't really had much to say about the Widowmaker segment, because, like, yeah, we're playing Widowmaker right now. Look at this. Not really a map where you have to worry about doing too much, like... Oh god, that was scary. Alright. Not too much a map where you have to worry too much about, like, abusing particular lines of sight on this map, because you don't really have a great many options for that one when attacking on Eichenwald, really, as Widowmaker. You got some on the second checkpoint, but, like, the defending team can make it really hard to, like, just stand on the castle and really abuse lines of sight from there, so... There are maps where you can do more cool stuff with line of sight as Widowmaker, but I don't find Eichenwald to be one of them. If you're defending, you've got a little bit more freedom during the second checkpoint, but if you're attacking, it's largely going to depend on what the defending team lets you get away with. Which is going to be true a lot of the time, to be fair, but particularly on Eichenwald. So we tried to get some ult charge on the dynamite right at the start there, as you do. I don't really like going out of the spawn, or out of the choke, rather. I like going out of the spawn. I don't like going out of the choke as Ashe very much, just because she's not as mobile as a lot of people are. So we haven't really, to be honest, I haven't had much to say about this video so far, but don't worry, we've got a lot of questions in the email at the end of the video to talk about, so, you know. Because for the most part, we're really just kind of like playing Ashe and Widowmaker. We haven't, like, done anything terribly egregious. I mean, I know we're on a Smurf right now, because we've seen this person before, and they are a higher rank than this, so I wouldn't expect to be seeing very many, like, egregious mistakes. Which we haven't. We've been clicking on the bad men, pretty much. So, they've got a lot of DPS still, so as long as, you know, basically as long as we don't have a repeat of round 1, we'll be good. But we did get it all the way to the end of the checkpoint during round 1, so it's not all bad, right? So their team comp is pretty fucking incredible, isn't it? Look at that. Ooh, baby. Yeah. I really love how, like, their duo over there looks at everything else going on in their team and doesn't think, Hans, are we the baddies? Are we part of the problem right now? Like, doesn't occur to them at all. No. we're gonna pick Genji and Bastion while we're attacking with the 3 other DPS. That seems like the only logical course of action, really, doesn't it? Yeah, so that's Overwatch for you, right? Just in general. Might as well send Bob out, to be honest with you. I'm not expecting him to get a lot of value on this one, unless the enemy team are just, like, really bad. And just start walking around the corner over there, to be honest. But, given their team... Fucking got him! She's like, she can't get me. she gotta click real good to guess where. Oh, fuck, right. Shit, fuck. She does have the dynamite, doesn't she? She was just like waiting, like, maybe Ashe will turn around, and that's when I'll get her. That's when I'll fucking get her, ma'am. Ma'am. The enemy team are making it pretty easy on us during this round, aren't they? We've got the Bastion as well, and, like, as long as they don't kill the Bastion, we're gonna be pretty good as far as our team comp versus their team comp goes, because, like, what are they gonna do, right? Like, they've gotta all just kind of run up to Bastion to try and kill him, like... So now their team comp's getting better. Someone over there's figured it out. Someone over there is like... Hold on a second. If we don't have a tank, how are we going to get through the choke point? To which some of them have gone, well, I'll pick Genji / Sombra. And then I'll get through the choke point, no problem. But our man over there has looked at the broader picture and gone, so I could pick, like, Tracer and get myself through the choke point, right? But what if I picked Reinhardt and got several of us through the choke point instead? That's better than just me being in the choke point. Oh, fuck. He's figured it out. He's managed to figure it out. So they have started to manage to get through the choke point. They have started to ingress into our personal space. Soldier used Tac Visor. He got one man and then immediately got mowed down. Sombra's over here behind us. I'm not particularly excited to use Coach Gun like this, unless it's going to be to finish the person off, because it's really easy to use Coach Gun to finish somebody off if it's a flanker, right? But I'd rather save it to try and finish them if I'm just going to, like, spin around and shoot them with it, because, like, if the fight doesn't go very well, we're going to want to use Coach Gun to run away, because we could just walk out the door, Coach Gun up to the high ground, and get away. So, just, like, spinning around and using the Coach Gun on someone is usually not a great reaction. If it's Genji, sometimes it'll get you pretty far, though. Because, like, here's a great, like, matchup tip for you as Ashe versus Genji. When Genji starts deflecting in front of you, if you Coach Gun him, you fly 1,000 miles away from Genji. Because you get the knockback from firing the Coach Gun, but then he reflects the Coach Gun bullets back into you, which are also a knockback. So if Genji starts deflecting in front of you and you're in any way scared of him, like, you just fucking leave if you fire the Coach Gun into Genji. Like, no problem. You get the double knockback. Oh, we did get the person. No, we got his trap. Damn, we didn't get him. I heard it tick and I was like, yeah, we got him. Farah's killed herself. Didn't Farah just kill herself? Is Farah just throwing herself off the map? I feel like Farah just killed herself a second ago. I might be crazy, though. So we are shooting Bastion right now while the lamp is up. We should be shooting the lamp instead. We do have Bob ready. Yeah, I'm pretty much just thinking about throwing Bob down as well. I don't really want him to be on that side of the payload, but being on the other side to be able to shoot people as they're coming in, rather than just, like, once they're on the point, rather. Well, they could be on the point and be out of Bob's line of sight as well. But that's fairly nitpicky by that point, because let's be honest, what the fuck were they gonna do from that position, right? So, for the most part, I don't think there was too terribly much to take away from the game, because I think overall, like, we played the heroes as expected, you know? Pretty much just, like, mechanically, you know, we could have clicked on the men better, but for, like, positioning-wise, I feel like we pretty much played the heroes, you know? Which is most of the task when playing as the like long-range hit-scan DPS. A lot of it's positioning. A little overly aggressive in some situations, but I feel like overall pretty fine. So we'll go over now to the questions. So first off, how should I play against Hammond when playing as Ashe and Widowmaker? I feel really obsolete when I'm playing against them as Hammond, so what do you suggest? So I've heard from people who play Widowmaker, because I don't have much ground playing Widowmaker personally, but I've heard from Widowmaker mains that playing against Hammond is like really, really terrible for Widowmaker pretty much, because he's got no head hitbox, because like if you're playing against like Winston or D.Va as Widowmaker, you know, you can do something to them as they're coming towards you because they've got really big crit boxes. So once Winston and D.Va are coming towards you, you can shoot them as they're coming in, and then, hey, you've done most of the work by the time they even arrive, right? Hammond, you can't do that because his crit box is relatively small and also just non-existent while he's in ball form, which is how he's coming at you to begin with, right? And then if he focuses you, pile drivers you have to use your grappling hook right then and there just to get away from the Hammond at all, because once he's pile drove you, then you're just up down. Like, he's just shooting you the whole time. Like, that's pretty free for Hammond. So you just, like, have to use your grappling hook then to get away. But Hammond's grappling hook is, what, a 4-second cooldown? So he's coming after you. So I've heard from Widowmaker players that, like, you've got, like, not a lot of options versus Hammond as Widowmaker, personally. Pretty much it's going to be playing around, like, playing closer to your team and hoping that they help you, pretty much, as Widow, because Widow just doesn't have a lot of means of defending herself against Hammond, unfortunately. And I do have experience playing Ashe. It's largely the same thing, though Ashe is not as heavily punished for, like, positioning closer to her teammates as Widow can be, right? Because Widow really likes standing, like, far away, high vantage points. Usually Widow is kind of standing off by herself. Ashe, you can play closer to your team, and it's not necessarily as much of a detriment to you. Like, you still like to be in similar places to Widowmaker, but you can play closer to the front as Ashe, and it's not so terrible. So there's that. Coach Gun is a little bit better for defending against Hammond, because you can blast him away before he even gets to you, so you can avoid the pile driver situation altogether by just knocking him away. Ashe also has, like, better DPS versus Hammond compared to Widowmaker, just because Ashe can, like, rapid fire shots more quickly than Widowmaker can. So it's still not good. Like, you still don't want to fight Hammond as much as possible, so a lot of it is just kind of like, I just try to avoid dealing with Hammond for as long as possible. I try and, like, focus on other things, and when he tries to get me, I just try and, like, coach gun him away as he's coming in, because, like, he's hooking in, you can coach gun him back. When he's, like, beginning to pile drive over you, you can coach gun him to get him away from you. So, like, you can stop him from, like, getting close to you with the coach gun, whereas Widowmaker has to dodge him or wait until you've gotten hit and then start running away after that point. Ashe can be a little bit more proactive about it as he's coming in, but for the most part, it's really just, like, avoiding Hammond and trying to deal with other things first, and just being, like, aware of where he is, what he's up to, and playing around that, because you're not favored when fighting Hammond, and, like, he really has to fuck up to die to you, so it's mostly about avoiding him and dealing with other things, unfortunately, you know. Tragically, it's one of those matchups where there isn't a lot you can do. The best you can do is play with your teammates, and try and get some help from them, because he really fucks up the long-range, like, hit-scan DPS, with the exception of McCree. He doesn't fuck McCree up, but he counters people like Hammond counters people like Ashe and Widowmaker, so it's always going to be difficult. It's mostly just going to be about avoiding him. Unfortunate, but, you know, is sometimes the case, matchup-wise. He does, like, really fuck with Ashe and Widow. So next up, when I use my first Bob at 341, which is the one we actually stopped and talked about, I feel like he didn't do much. How can I maximize my use with Bob? I feel like I either A, throw him in a useless spot where everyone hides from him, or B, he goes into the heart of a battle and dies super quickly. When and where do I use him? So, Bob is really awkward to use, and sometimes, like, depending on the enemy team comp, it's, like, almost impossible to get much value out of Bob sometimes. Like, versus, like, what the team was at the time, it was always gonna be difficult for Bob to do a lot because of the fact their team is largely people that are going to be pretty far away, so it won't be hard for them to get out of line of sight of Bob, you know? Like, sometimes that's going to be the case. Sometimes the enemy team is, like, really CC heavy, so it ends up, fucking Bob over in a different way. Like, if they got an Anna, like, Bob can just get fucked, like, pretty quickly. If they've got a Roadhog or a Bridget on certain maps, they can just kill Bob by knocking him off the map, or effectively kill him by just, like, putting him out of the way, right? Like, if you're playing to get Bridget versus Ashe, you can just, like, push Bob around a corner, and then the Bob situation is dealt with. So, sometimes, unfortunately, Bob is just, like, really difficult to get much value out of. So, I don't usually worry much about Bob staying alive, because as far as I'm concerned, like, as long as Bob has done some damage before, like, a fair chunk of damage before he's died, and drawn a bunch of aggro, that's fine, as far as I'm concerned. Like, even if, like, Bob dies because, like, a few of them use their cooldowns on him, right? As far as I'm concerned, that's still a win, because they spent resources on a member of our team that is only here temporarily, right? Like, they didn't use those cooldowns on a real person, they used them on Bob instead. Bob not being a real person, sorry, Bob. But, you know, and, like, if one of them uses, like, their ultimate on, like, I've seen Roadhog use, Whole Hog to push, Bob away before, and I've been like, great, like, fair enough, you use that ultimate to, like, on my not real teammate, right? Instead of one of my real teammates. So, even if, like, something like that happens, I'm not too heartbroken about it. So, the best time to do it is, like, a lot of people will throw Bob in, like, to try and start a fight, like, as an initiation. Bob is a really bad initiation, because if nothing is happening at the time to take attention away from Bob, no cooldowns have been expended. Like, you're right at the start of the fight, right? So this is when people are most likely to have their cooldowns, and nothing else is happening. So that's when people are the most free to react to Bob. They are very free to just throw cooldowns at Bob. They're not being pressured by anything else, so they can just get out of the way. So the best time to use Bob, I find, is right after the team fight has started, right? Like, what your tank has started the fight, and then, like, right after he's initiated, or as he's initiating, that's when I'll throw Bob in. Because now they have to worry about two things at the same time. They've got to worry about what the tank is doing over here, and what my teammates are doing in general, because, like, the fight's initiating, so everybody's about to throw shit at them, right? And they also have to worry about Bob. So kind of similar to, like, how, you can use ultimates like, Self-Destruct or Deadeye in such a way that it's not necessarily that they're necessarily going to do something, but it's making it very difficult for the enemy team, because they're having to worry about multiple things at the same time, right? Because if you're playing, like, D.Va, and you throw Self-Destruct behind the enemy team, and then, like, while they're worrying about that behind them, your teammates are initiating at the front, they've got to worry about something at two sides, right? Similar kind of concept, but Bob is going to be coming at them from the same side as the initiation. But Bob's very scary. Bob's going to kill a DPS or a support extremely quickly, and a tank isn't going to particularly like getting hit by Bob, right? So, like, if there's a Reinhardt over there, and my Reinhardt's initiating, if I throw Bob in at the same time, now their Reinhardt really fucking doesn't want to take his shield down, right? Because Bob's out there as well. And then they've got to be worrying about that. Also, if you throw yours in while your team is initiating, or right after they've initiated, that's when Bob's knock-up is most likely to be effective also, because people fixate on, like, the Bob shooting people aspect, which is, you know, a big part of Bob, obviously. But, like, Bob's knock-up when he hits someone is actually, like, incredibly fucking strong. Because it's, like, a pretty long, not a hard crowd control effect, but it's a fairly long immobilization, right? Where they can't really do very much. And it makes it easier for you to shoot people while they're up in the air. They can't really maneuver properly. It makes it easier for your teammates to do stuff as well. So that's when, like, the knock-up is most likely to be effective as well. So, and this is also why I usually just, like, throw Bob straight at the enemy team. There are some situations where you want to throw Bob in such a way that he's going to hit a wall, so that he's just going to be in a really inconvenient place for the enemy team. Because on a map like King's Row, this is where I'm usually, like, most likely to do it, third checkpoint in the tunnel. If I'm, like, up on the high ground, like the center point, on the third checkpoint next to the pit, sometimes, like, the enemy team will start pushing in, and I'll throw Bob just so that he hits the wall next to the crates, because then their team has to worry about something on either side of them, right? Because they're, like, pushing under me, I throw Bob over there to hit the wall, Bob's never gonna hit them, but now he's behind the enemy team while they're pushing in, so now they have to worry about Bob back there and my team over there, so that's very inconvenient for them. Sometimes stuff like that's really cool, but I find usually it's usually best to just throw Bob at the enemy team as your team is engaging, or right after they've engaged, so that you can get a bunch of people with the knock-up, and then Bob is kind of just, like, in the middle, shooting at people. And because he's in the middle, he is more likely to just die, but he's also in, like, a good position to hopefully kill someone really quickly. And, like, if Bob gets, like, nano-boosted in that position, Bob fucking clears house, right? So that's what I find is usually the best case for Bob. But Bob is a really counterintuitive ultimate to use, just because he is so weird. But don't be too upset if Bob doesn't always get huge value, because depending on the map and depending on the enemy team comp, like, it can be really hard to get a lot of value out of Bob. That's just kind of the nature of the ultimate. But when Bob is really strong, Bob is really strong. He's got one of the highest, like, differences between his peaks and his troughs, right? Where, like, Bob at his best seems like the absolute most disgustingly powerful ultimate in the entire game. But at his absolute worst, Bob accomplishes literally nothing. So, Bob is that way, unfortunately, sometimes. But that's what I find is usually the best use case for Bob. Boy, that was a long one. We still got a lot more questions to go for. It would really behoove me to be a little bit more eloquent with these things, wouldn't it? So, next up. Speaking of Bob, how do you think I took too long to charge him up? First round, it took us a while to charge Bob, but the enemy team was also really hard to hit for the most part as well. This is going to be the case usually when the enemy team is really DPS heavy. Because they are mostly DPS, they have less tanks, and tanks are usually the place you get most of your ult charge from, and you don't get a lot of ult charge from DPS. So if the enemy team is like triple, quad, quintuple DPS, you're gonna usually actually spend a lot more time building your ult charge. So first round, it took us a while to build Bob, but because of their team comp, that's pretty much what I'd expect. If anything, we might have built it a little quickly, all things considered, because we did, even though there were a lot of DPS, we actually still managed to, like, hit and kill quite a few people up until that point. So, if anything, that might have been fairly quick, given what the enemy team comp was. And then the second round, like, we built Bob pretty fast the second round. So, you know, first round, yeah, it took us a while, but no, I don't think it took too long because of what the enemy team comp was. I wouldn't expect to build the ultimate that quickly just because they were so DPS heavy and therefore have less tanks for me to farm ult charge off of, which is where most ult charge comes from. Next up is, how should I be playing against the Symmetra, especially when she uses her ult? I feel like her constant peeking makes it really hard for me to get a good shot on her, so I was wondering how I should approach her. It's really difficult to do much to Symmetra as Ashe, because, yeah, she can just do like a lot of charge orb peek, charge orb peek, charge orb peek, which makes it difficult to kill her. You pretty much just have to, like, click on her head real fucking good when she peeks, right? Which is hard to do. And dude, Symmetra's ult is one of the worst things you can see happen as Ashe, so unfortunately, this is not going to be an answer that you want to hear. It is one of the worst things that you can see when you're playing Ashe, because it makes it so difficult to accomplish anything. Like, you can't even really use Bob when she uses her ultimate, because they can just stand on the other side of the shield, and then Bob is completely useless at that point, right? And if they, like, if Symmetra positions her wall correctly, there's, like, really nothing you can do, except hope it's gone. Except hope it goes away, pretty much. If she uses it badly, like, the best case scenario is that she puts it too far forward or she puts it too far back. Because if she puts it too far forward, you can walk through the barrier and then start shooting at people, right? And they can maybe still, like, barrier dance with you, which is going to make it difficult, but then you're at least in a position where you can maybe do something, right? And if she puts it too close, then her teammates are just being, like, hamstrung and grouped up, so then, like, it doesn't even necessarily matter anymore what I do, because hopefully my teammates can, like, squish in on them while they're grouped up behind it, or it's so far back that they can't actually use it, right? That's the best case scenario when you're playing Ashe, unfortunately, versus Symmetra's ultimate, is hope Symmetra fucks up. Because if Symmetra uses her wall correctly, you can't hit anybody, because they're behind it, there's nothing you can do. If it's positioned correctly, you won't be able to just walk through it, because you'll die, so you're fucked there. And if it's positioned correctly, you can't even use Bob properly, because Bob won't be... They'll just be able to stand on the other side of the barrier to Bob, and then Bob does nothing, right? If you can even get Bob in there to begin with, because it's possible that you're not even in a position where you can get Bob on the other side of the barrier, which is even worse, right? So, this is not the answer you want to hear, but it is really one of the worst things you can see when you're playing Ashe, is Symmetra use her ult correctly. There's really, like, no recourse for you, unfortunately. And, when she's doing the wall peeking, the best you can do is, like, try and get a shot in on her. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a headshot, but ideally it is. If you can get a shot in on her and then throw the dynamite at her, the dynamite doesn't give a shit if she's hiding around the corner, right? Like, you can get people around corners with the dynamite. So ideally you can get a shot or two in at her, chuck the dynamite at her, and then it'll finish her off on the other side of the wall. It's possible you don't need the dynamite. If you click on her real good, you don't need the dynamite, but more realistically, you'll get a shot in on the Symmetra, she'll duck behind the wall, that's when you chuck the dynamite at her, and then, maybe it doesn't kill her, but, like, that kept her suppressed for a while she was on fire and low health, and her teammates had to invest time keeping her alive, right? They had to start healing her, put bubbles on her, or something like that, right? So that's, like, the best case, because any, like, hit scan DPS, when you're playing against a character that can just do the peeksies, like Symmetra can with her balls, and spam it, like, the best you can ever really do is, like, click on their heads real good, but Ashe does have the extra buffer of the dynamite not giving a fuck if they're behind a corner, so you can get, like, a good shot in, use the dynamite. But, tragically, Symmetra's ult, yeah. There are very few situations where I've seen Symmetra's ult as Ashe and not been like, well, I'm fucking useless until that's gone. Unfortunate, but it's going to be the case when you're, like, a long-range hit-scan DPS. If Symmetra places her wall correctly, like, her teammates are going to be hidden behind it, and you're not going to be able to just walk through it and start hitting them. Probably not the answer you want to hear, but it is, unfortunately, just, like, really, really hard to deal with as Ashe. Next up was, starting from 717, do you think I play Widowmaker too cautiously as Widowmaker? Should I be closer? I couldn't find a better angle at the time to shoot from, so I feel like I wasn't doing much for that segment on the bridge. So let's go back to 717 specifically, and look at that. So yeah, this is when we were all the way back here. So this particular check, but as I was saying at the time, this is where it gets difficult to play Widowmaker on this part of the map, because, like, it's difficult to get good lines of sight. So we could position a little bit more aggressively, because they are, like, fighting out in this little foyer right here. So we could try, like, standing up here or standing up here, and then we can see in. Because the unfortunate thing about being this far back is we can't really see over the rubble. But the trade-off is that if we're standing, like, up here, here, which are our only real options, right, in terms of, like, seeing into this range, like, these 4 spots, right? The problem is that if they're fighting in this hallway right here, it leaves us really open, right? Because we're very close to them. So for, like, especially if we're down on these 2 points down here, like, they are in range of just, like, walking up and hitting us, right? And up here, it's harder for them to get us, but they're not exactly great lines of sight. Like, we can't really see into the hallway that well from up there, and this, the closer you are as Widowmaker, the harder it is to use a scope to see the enemy, right? Like, Because if you're too close, you start looking through the scope, you're like, oh fuck, you gotta like whip around to like try and find them and shit. Like, if you're really close with a scoped weapon, it makes it difficult to actually see the person at all, to click on them. So, you know, there are places we can go to stand more aggressively, but and potentially, you know, see more people. Because right back here, we can only really see people if they're high up in the sky, or like if they come like around here, we can see them. So, but the trade-off is we're way more exposed, and the line of sight isn't great because we're basically like right on top of them. This is just one of the parts of like on a map where Widowmaker is gonna have trouble just because of the geometry of the map, pretty much. I was trying to think if you can stand on the castle behind us. I'm not... Can you stand there? Hold on, I'm gonna start Overwatch real quick to check something. Yeah, alright, so you can stand back here, and you'd be able to see through the doorway as well. The door is obviously shut right now, so that makes it a little bit more difficult to illustrate my points, but, you know, it wouldn't be great because, you know, if you think about like this compared to that, the rubble's gonna be blocking part of the hallway all the same, but you can see further in without being very exposed. But this angle is not great. They'll be cut off behind the wall. There's going to be rubble blocking them as well. But, you know, you'll be able to see a little bit further in than down there necessarily. But this is just one of those parts where, like, the geometry on this map will make it difficult, or this particular checkpoint, I should say. Not this map, but this part of this checkpoint over here. It's difficult for Widowmaker. There aren't, like, great places for her to stand, which is... The perils of being, like, a longer range here. Like, Soldier has this problem on a bunch of maps as well, where there are, like, not great places for him to stand. Usually King of the Hill maps, like you think about, like, Oasis University. There's no great place for Soldier to stand on that map. Ilios Well, there's no great place for Soldier to stand on that map, you know? Like, it's the peril of being a long-range hit-scan DPS sometimes, so... just from, like, watching the rest of the game, I didn't really feel like, there was a problem with playing too cautiously. This is just, like, a map geometry part where, like, this checkpoint Widowmaker will struggle with. So, yeah, don't worry about it too much with this particular one, because that's just this map. If they're, like, it gets easier once the fighting isn't happening in this initial part, right? Like, once it turns around the bend, then it's easier for Widowmaker, because you can go and stand on the, ramp over there and be looking across at them. So it gets easier once the fighting has moved into the checkpoint a little bit, but like this opening part is difficult. So next up is, we'll do that one last. So then next up is, when I play Ashe, I find it really hard to manage her reloads, especially since it takes so long. How should I balance between shooting and reloading, especially when I'm being dove on? So I'm really bad at this, to be fair. Like, this is definitely the thing I struggled the most with Ashe as well. It's pretty much like finding every opportunity to reload as possible, even if it's only 1 or 2 shells at a time, right? Like, sometimes you're shooting at someone, Reinhardt puts his barrier up, like, well, whatever. You know, you're not great at breaking barriers, so like, I can't shoot that guy anymore, I'll take this time to reload. Oh, now, he's taking it down, so I'll start shooting again. Maybe I only reloaded 2 shells, or 1 shell, but like, you know, that's progress, right? Like, that's some efficiency. So like, you know, you see, if you're shooting at somebody and they break line of sight, you just go, alright, well, I'll start reloading right now. And then maybe they start peeking at you again, you're like, alright, that's when you stop, and then, you know, maybe you've only reloaded a shell or 2, but that's still, like, something, right? So, because Ashe reloads, like, 1 bullet at a time, but you can reload on any bullet, right? Or you can interrupt the reload on any bullet. So, there are a lot of situations where you can find time to squeeze in 1 or 2 bullets because there isn't much productive you could be doing. And then, you know, you haven't, like, fully reloaded, but you've reloaded a little bit piecemeal. And, like, this is the reason that I struggle with it most, is, like, having some discipline and not just, like, firing randomly, right? Like, I mean, you're not firing randomly as any character, right? But... like, being caught low on ammo is really punishing for Ashe, right? Because if you're ever in a position where, like, you're fighting someone and you're down to 0 bullets, you're like, fuck, like, reload 1 bullet, shoot, fuck, reload 1 bullet, shoot, right? Like, that's the worst situation you can find yourself in. So it's really punishing to get low on ammo as Ashe. So it's like finding all of these, like, little times where you can reload a couple of bullets at least, if not fully reload. And just, like, being deliberate with your shots and being like, well, not taking shots where you have, like, a really low chance of hitting the person, right? Like, having the discipline to go, like, alright, well, you know, I'm not great at breaking barriers, so I shouldn't, like, spend a huge amount of time doing that. My bullets are better spent, like, looking for people who have exposed themselves instead of standing behind the shield or, like, chucking dynamite over it and, like, shooting that. Like, Ashe isn't great at breaking barriers, so, like, and I do this, where I'm shooting at the barrier. Like, Ashe isn't great at that. It's usually going to be better for me to try and find an angle to slip bullets past the barrier, or, like, wait for someone to expose themselves instead rather than shooting at the barrier. And, like, you know, sometimes you try and shoot the guy that's on the other side of the map, and it's like, well, you know, you had a low chance of hitting the guy, and even if you did hit him, like, what was he gonna really amount to, right? So, it's about, like, having discipline in terms of, like, what you shoot at, and not just, like, going, well, you know, let's just fire a bunch of shots in there and see if I hit something, right? Like, and you know, you're probably not doing that, but I think you get the basic idea, right? Like, it's so punishing for Ashe compared to most heroes to get caught low on ammo or be in a position where she has to reload, right? Like, if the fight goes on for a really long time, inevitably, eventually you have to reload. And that's terrible. And so there's, like, finding all the times to reload, even if it's just a bullet or two at a time, not going for, like, low shots and being, like, really deliberate in terms of how you use your ammo. And if you are in a position where you're, like, really low on ammo, like, don't do the thing, and I do this as well, so, like, you know, I gotta stop this as well, but, like, don't do the thing where you reload one bullet and then shoot, and then reload one bullet and then shoot, right? Because you're down to 0 bullets, so you're like, fuck, one bullet, shoot, one bullet, shoot. Like, just, like, take the time and, like, reload. Like, just, like, reload a few bullets. You don't need to wait till, like, it's full ammo, necessarily, but, like, if you're in a position where you're fighting and you're down to 0 ammo, just, like, reload a bunch of bullets rather than doing the constant interruption. Because, like, the time it takes, like, you load the bullet, then you gotta, like, go through the recovery, shoot the bullet, reload, recovery, shoot the bullet, right? Like, rather than doing that, it's easier for just let Ashe just, like, load a bunch of bullets in at the same time. Because once she starts reloading, she reloads the subsequent ones faster. So it's better to just, like, let her reload a few bullets and then just start firing at that point. Like, if I'm in the middle of a team fight and I'm like, fuck, this has gone on a long time, I'm out of ammo, I'm just like, fuck, I'm gonna reload, like... I'll, like, look at the team fight and I'll be like, well, I can't really see anybody right now, they're, like, in a Winston bubble or something, so I'm like, I'm gonna reload as close to full as I can possibly get. But if, like, there's, like, no barriers in the way and there's a bunch of people just, like, scattering out in the open, I'm like, alright, I got people I can be shooting at right now, I'm gonna reload, like, 6 bullets and then just see what I can do, right? Like, just reload a few bullets rather than doing the constant interruptions, because that's what, like, most Ashe players, myself included, do during team fights, where, like, you're just like, fuck, I gotta do something, right? And it's better to just let it reload. This is the same kind of, it shouldn't be that hard for me, it's the same kind of mentality as, like, being Reinhardt and not putting your shield up when you've got, like, 100 health on the shield, right? Like, just let it regenerate up a little bit. Same kind of idea. So those are, like, the kind of 3 big things for me in terms of ammo management. But by far the biggest one is just finding all the little times where you could be reloading, like, a couple of bullets at a time. Because then the more often you find those little time saves, the less you have to worry about points 2 and 3, because you're just higher on ammo consistently throughout the match. So there you go. And then the last question is, what do you think of my stats attached? Should they be higher or lower? So we'll open the stats. We got 2, because we got one for Ashe, and we got one for Widow. Bring them over here. Can you see those? Yeah, you should be able to see those. So now, all things considered, the damage is low, right? Like, 5k damage, Ashe can do better than that. 3k damage, Widow can do better than that. But we have to take the game into consideration, right? So, and, like, because the thing we have to take into account is the enemy team was mostly DPS, right? Which means there are mostly people that are hard to hit. And mostly people that, like, when we do hit them, we're doing less damage to them, because they just have less hit points to take away, right? If we shoot a Genji twice, Genji's basically dead or fully dead. If we shoot a Reinhardt twice, he is not dead. He is probably not close to being dead, right? So you have to take that into account. So Ashe can do better than that. definitely. But for this particular game, 5k isn't that bad, right? Like, it could still be higher, like, we could have clicked better on the bad men, but because of the fact that they were, I think the least they ever were triple DPS, but they were quintuple DPS multiple times. So it's not actually that bad. Same for Widow. And like, Widow's one of those cases where, like, she's not great at doing DPS, but she's very good at killing people. These two things are not necessarily the same thing, right? Like, Mei is not great at doing damage, but she's very good at killing people. You're never going to see you can see it happen, but you don't want to see a Mei with gold damage, right? Like, a Mei can have gold eliminations quite easily. It's quite hard for Mei to have gold damage. Same deal for Widowmaker, right? So, yeah, the stats are, like, low, but they're low for an average game. But this game is very DPS heavy, so these stats are not actually that bad. And, like, for Ashe, 46% accuracy versus a team that is mostly flankers and DPS is actually pretty good. Because usually, like, 50% is, like, the general metric people use for, like, yeah, this is where it starts being, like, fine, right? But, you know, if they've got a lot of tanks, if they're, like, goats, then having, like, 60 DPS or 60% accuracy is more what you'd expect. So, like, if they're mostly DPS, like, 40% is kind of what I'd say is, like, fine versus that kind of team comp, right? Like, so, yeah, the stats are low for your average game. But for this particular game, I think the stats are actually, like, fine. Just because of the sheer amount of DPS relative to tanks. And healers. Healers also play into it, because if the DPS has got a healer with them, you can get more health out of them as well. But they had, like, one healer, one tank, if that, right? So, they are low, but not for this particular game. And that's why this is why I'm always like, deaths is the only one that is, like, always objectively a good stat to have lower numbers of, right? Like, dying less is always good. But, like, because, like, if you showed me, like, 5k damage on Ashe out of your average game, I'd go, oh no, that's really fucking low, right? But this, because usually, like, this was a 12-minute game, not overly long. But, like, over a 12-minute game, so, like, fully pushed in, wasn't overtime, but, like, fully pushed in, held on first point, I'd expect that to be, like, 9-10k on your average, like, 12-minute game, if a little bit high, maybe a little bit higher. Somewhere in the region of 8k to 12k. But this wasn't your average Icon Vault game, so I think it's actually fine. So, no. This is why lower deaths is the only stat I really worry about. It's the only stat that can't lie to you. Because the other stats can lie to you, and you have to, like, think about the game in question. So, fuck. That took a long-ass time to get through those questions, because I'm so just rambling and incoherent. But hopefully that helped. Hopefully that answered your questions. That was all of them, right? We did that. What's this question? Oh, don't worry about adding more to the list of requests. Like, quite frequently, I don't actually have that many, videos in the backlog. Like, recently I've had to go to the Overwatch University subreddit and, like, ask people if I can use the videos they've put up there. So, like, but don't fucking worry about sending me videos. If anything, send me more fucking videos, because I don't usually actually have that many of them in the backlog. So, don't fucking worry about that. So no, that was all the questions. So thank you very much for watching if you did. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask. I'm more than happy to answer. If you felt I answered any of your questions from the email inadequately, please let me know. I will try to expand further. If you haven't already, you can join our Discord, ask questions more directly, have a conversation about them, or just shitpost with us. I've started streaming on Twitch Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 7 p.m. EST to 11 EST. There's a link to the channel in the description. And if you managed to make it all the way through the video and somehow still enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe for more content of middling quality in the future, and I hope you found the video helpful.